Okay, stand by 13. We're looking at it.
Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? The show starts in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go.
We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. Because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone, and one we intend to win, and the others too.
Hi, my name is Benjamin Dries, and I'll be taking you on a journey through space and time to help you learn some interesting facts about space and animals.
Initiating launch sequence.
Liftoff will start in T-minus 10 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We have ignition.
At the end of the Second World War, a Nazi V-2 ballistic missile had parachuted and landed in New Mexico. It was discovered that the missile had travelled 109 kilometers in the air to the point where space begins and was full of fruit flies. When scientists opened the capsule, they discovered that they had all survived. So then in 1947, American scientists sent the first living thing to outer space. And yes, it was the fruit fly. They were sent into space. Scientists were trying to test out how radiation affects the human body. The fruit fly has a similar genetic build to our own genetics, so this seems like a good starting point. I wonder if they had to use their limbs when they were in space. In 1948 to 1949, Albert was the first man to be sent into space, but sadly he died from suffocation because the capsule was too small. A year later, Albert II was sent into space to 134 kilometers above the Earth. Albert II had made it into space, but sadly died when re-entering the Earth, as the capsule's parachute failed to work. A total of 32 monkeys and apes of different breeds were sent into space, but sadly none of them survived. In the 1950s, NASA sent mice into space to 137 kilometers from Earth. The life soon adapted to being in outer space and zero gravity. Once again, the life didn't survive returning to Earth because of a parachute failure. Again. In 1957, the space race started. The Cold War was on between the US and the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union had just built and sent into space the first satellite. It was called Sputnik. This had the world with concerns about the Soviet Union controlling space. Sputnik orbited the Earth for 3 weeks before the batteries died and it fell to Earth 2 months later. The Russians then launched Sputnik 2, which later a Dornian lord called Lyuka. She was a stray puppy found on the streets of Moscow. She was the most famous dog that went into space. Other dogs have been sent to space. It was believed that Australia would adapt better to being in space. Lyuka only had enough food for 1 meal and was given only 7 days of oxygen to survive. The Russians claimed that Lyuka died because of running out of oxygen, but the truth is that Lyuka only survived 5 hours into the voyage as she died from overheating. In 1968, the race between the USA and the Soviet Union was on to get the first man into space. Russia, once again in the space race, sent a capsule with soil samples of seeds, crushed worms, and 2 steppe tortoises. They had a successful trip round the moon, and after a 6-day return trip to Earth, they landed in the Indian Ocean. Still alive, they only lost 10% of their body weight. If space travel became cheap enough, Weight Watchers would probably have to think about putting it in their program. Then in 1969, the world was glued to little television screens in their living room, watching a black and white image transmitted from space of the first man on the moon.
Houston, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin were the 2 famous astronauts to step foot on the moon. It was remarkable they landed on the moon and took the step for mankind. This mission was not with complication. They overshot the landing pad on the moon, which meant they could end up with problems with not having enough fuel to return to Earth. But thankfully, both men returned to Earth safely.
The President of the United States is in his office now and would like to say a few words to you. Over. That would be an honor. Go ahead, Mr. President. This is Houston out.
Hello, Neil and Buzz. I'm talking to you by telephone from the Oval Room at the White House. And this certainly has to be the most historic telephone call ever made from the White House. I just can't tell you how proud we all are of what you have done. For every American, this has to be the proudest day of our lives. And for people all over the world, I am sure that they too join with Americans in recognizing what an immense feat this is. Because of what you have done, the heavens have become a part of man's world.
In the 1970s, a spacecraft called the Octavius, containing 2 bullfrogs with probes and electrodes implanted into them. This was to find out the understanding of motion sickness and to get a greater understanding of the Middle Ear. They also recorded data on the weightlessness. The study found that after 6 days in space, the vestibular systems returned to normal. In 1973, NASA was keen to see how microgravity would work on living things that only moved in 3-dimensionally on Earth. The aquanauts were now. They are found in the salt marsh. Both the astronauts and aquanauts both suffered motion sickness. This was showed in their fifth by swimming around in circles. Both, interestingly, settled down about the same time. After the Great Space Race, and the fact that we had put man on the moon, the interest in space travel significantly became important. Scientists still wanted to understand microgravity and the biological functions on animals. 2 garden spiders named Anita and Arabella were sent into space to see if they could spin webs. This was probably easy for them, but the webs were thinner than standard webs on Earth. Nematodes, also known as roundworms, were sent into orbit in 2003 on a Columbia space shuttle. It contained 80 experiments that were on board the shuttle. But sadly, on returning to Earth, there was a tragic accident. 7 astronauts died, but the only living survivors were a group of nematodes. They had survived a massive exposure to the heat of the glass. Tardigrades, also called water bears, were sent into space in 2007, microscopic invertebrates that could withstand pretty much anything on Earth. So it was thought that they could withstand everything in space. They dried them out and sent them into outer space. 10 days later, they returned to Earth and hydrated them. 68% survived the mission. It was with no surprise that there was no effect on them at all. In 2012, the Japanese sent a Holoclarian to the International Space Station. It had been fitted with LED lights to simulate night and day, and an automatic feeding and filter system. The chosen fish were lead-like, as they had transparent skins, which made it easy to see the effect on the inside of the fish. Well, I wonder what animal would be next in space. I would love to travel into space, but I think I will wait until they have figured out some other way of returning to Earth, seeing the parachute still seem a bit dodgy to me. Thank you for listening to my podcast.